Ben?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Chassie. I work for the Department of Education. I'm an infrastructure and cybersecurity specialist. Really what I do is connect principals, superintendents, IT directors to federal and local resources to try to help their cyber game, which is continually under a kind of a growing pressure and attack from the outside world. So I will be speaking today after Jonathan about student data privacy and infrastructure for security and what that might mean for you as a professional and for the students in your classroom. And I just told the group here, what's amazing is I'm at Mount Abram, and Jonathan didn't know this when he assigned me here. It was a bit of a journey this morning, but I have relatives in this area. And when I was 8 years old, I'm like, let's just say I'm going to retire in a year. So you can take a guess. I used to come in the back door and visit my grandmother, who was the lead cook at this particular school. So I have some good vibes coming here.
Every 50 years, we want to get you back there, Jim.
Well, and thanks for having me, and be patient as we kind of do this for our first time.
Yeah. Throughout the day, if you're in any of our sessions, these notebooks have all of the materials in them. So if you'd like a notes view version, that's the link on the left. If you'd like an edit version, it's on the right. It just has a place to keep notes in it, but also the links to the other 20 some odd presentations that you may see during the day. I'm Jonathan Warner. I was a tech integrator in Cape Elizabeth, and before that, an English teacher in Gorham, and got really interested in professional development when the Gorham tech integrator, Barbara Morgan, who is now the tech director at Westbrook, invited me to be on the professional development committee for technology. And I thought, why would you do that? And then I thought, why would you not do that? And so this opportunity to provide professional development turned into becoming an MLTI ambassador. So from 2021 to 23, I was working in schools, teaching teachers how to do tech integration. And I was supposed to go back to Cape Elizabeth, but the program had gotten so big that they asked me to stay on. And so now I run it. I'm called the MLTI Ambassador Program Facilitator, which is a nice long title, to basically say of the 10 professional development providers that we have, I coordinate those that are classroom teachers that come into the DOE for 2 years at a time. This is for folks at home. We'd love for you to use the chat. Jim and I will both be monitoring it, but wanted to also ask, if you don't mind, for the people that are live in both of our places, if you have your cameras off, it'll make it easier to keep our screens just focused on the other speaker, the other presenter. I'll drop in here also the link for anyone that would like the slides. And there we go. Let's see if I can do that. Whoop. Cool. First thing to say is that if, as we're talking, you're like, you know what, actually, this is not where I want to be. We much more important that we value your time over, our ego, and we totally get it. You have access to these slides. If you determine you want to be in a different session, no problem. We really appreciate your staying for a few minutes and seeing what you think. But as we said, we're coming to you from the DOE's perspective, but with both having really enormous respect for the complexity of being a classroom teacher right now and how challenging it is given all the things that are happening with the use and misuse of tech. So we have a whole team of people that are here to support this work. You may see others of them over the course of the day, whether it's computer science, AI, and emerging technology. If you want to reach out to any of us, it's just DOE-LTT@maine.gov, and we all get that email, and then we give it to whoever needs to support your question. But we offer support in all of these areas and really are happy to customize it in any way that would be useful. So if there are other things that you're not getting help with today that you'd like help with, we have this catalog of all the different offerings that we've had in the past year. That doesn't mean we can't do other things as well, but a lot of people are like, well, what can you do? We wanted to put in one place, some of the offerings that we can provide, and are delighted to come to staff meetings, come to department meetings in any ways, or just work remotely to support your work. I have a camp in Rangeley, so I'm happy to come help you out anytime because, then I get to go to camp. Also wanted to share that we have the annual MLTI Student Conference. We bring about 1,300 educators and students up to UMaine Orono, and we'd love to have you join with your students. We also love to have teachers present at that. Any kind of tech tools that they use, tech creation. We've had people do 3D printing, digital design, AI, computer science, anything that you would like to bring, we'd love to have you present, but also we'd love to just have you attend. That's the registration link, and that's May 22nd. It's always the Thursday before, I always want to say Labor Day, Memorial Day, up there, and we do it annually. And now I think this is our 22nd year hosting. Oh, and this year's theme is traveling around Maine, but any sort of sessions that are connected to that concept of exploration and travel are more than welcome. So we're going to preview today this resource that we're creating. We'll put it out later this spring, but supporting ways that technology is influencing the classroom positively and negatively, and how we can help with that. We'll kind of take you on a tour of it. And when Jim and I were talking about how to structure this, we thought maybe zooming all the way in first and looking at our students would be helpful. So I'll start by talking about kids' experiences and what it's like for them to interact with technology and sort of what their perspective is. And then we'll back up and look at, from a little further out, teacher experience and how we can support you in your thinking about supporting your student. And then we'll go with what my father calls 30,000-foot view. I don't know if that's a thing other people say, but we'll back all the way up and look at how bigger questions like cybersecurity and privacy influence our students' experiences. One of the things we've been really impressed by is how much kids are willing to engage in this conversation as well. So this is Jim's areas of expertise, and talking with them about why they're attacked, how they're attacked, what's happening can be an incredible discussion starter. And we'll talk about some of the ways you can bring those conversations into classrooms where you might not otherwise expect to be able to have that discussion. One of the things I have been so happy about is how much kids want to talk about it. And I wasn't anticipating that at all, but I'll engage with them, even not someone they know. And they're like, whoa, yeah. And they'll really dig in with me about various kind of questions that we'll talk about as to how they are experiencing technology. And I find it so helpful because, of course, that's what matters the most, is what they're experiencing. Jim will then zoom in a little bit and look at infrastructure and the digital divide, talking about questions like why kids need access to technology, what it's like when they don't have it, and what they can do about it. And then we'll look at this kind of a larger question of digital citizenship, framing the whole discussion. And one of the parts that we have found really useful in kind of centering it is reimagining not just citizenship, but digital leadership, and thinking about the ways that that is really even more important. Citizenship being like compliance and following the rules, and leadership being doing really great things with technology to make changes. So George Couros is this kind of awesome thinker about education technology. And he says that if you imagine the digital part, that is just using the internet and social media. But what he has said is that our current understanding of citizenship is just following the rules, doing the right thing. So using it in a responsible and ethical way. Really important. But the part that really shifts their thinking about it is when you say to them, what if you use your technology to improve the lives and well-being of others? And you say, what can we do with technology? Whether that's participating in a movement, Black Lives Matter, Not Again, Never Again, where they're sort of taking action, or using it for creation, using it for digital exploration of things that they might otherwise not be able to see, 3D modeling, VR, AR. If they shift their mindset from being just consumers to being creators, that alone really shifts the way that they experience their technology, and not just sort of like foisted on them and something that they have to absorb, but they're as much a part of interacting with it as the people who are creating the technology that they experience. So really centering it on student well-being, what's happening to them and what's really changing their experience day to day because they're interacting with tech. has been a great question for us. So you guys are welcome to say this out loud if you want. This is for our folks at home, and folks at home, you're also welcome to put that in the chat. But my question for you to begin is, what brings you to today's presentation? What is it that, as you're thinking about the questions that I've just addressed, you've said, like, you know what, this is what's happening in my classroom, and this is why I want to look at it some more. You guys are welcome to say it out loud if you like, and I can share with the group at home.
Be better for students and safely navigating everything digital.
Perfect. Better at safely navigating everything digital. We talk about how challenging wait time is in Zoom. It's like you just, all I can hear is the Jeopardy theme in my mind. Oh, I forgot I have to click over here. If you haven't used Menti, it's awesome. It allows you just to do these kinds of surveys. It'll do word clouds. And when you go into the menti.com side, your participant, mentimeter.com is the side that a teacher would create. There are free teacher accounts, and it lets you do this kind of like classroom survey to pull in information and kind of interact digitally with people that are maybe not as willing to speak out loud. I found it's really, I used to teach in a classroom with 50 students because I was co-teaching American Studies, and then young women who would not speak at all would jump into digital conversations in a way that was really cool. And one of the reasons that I really started to get interested in what tech could do to level the playing field for kids. There we go. I was first introduced to the concept of kids being on their own with this from Kevin Honeycutt, who spoke at Actum, which is like the statewide computer tech user conference for teachers. And he said, our kids are growing up on a digital playground and no one is on recess duty. And I don't know why that hit me like a ton of bricks, but I thought that is exactly the problem, right? They're doing this completely on their own, and we're making the assumption that they get it and they know what to do. And over and over and over again, they demonstrate they don't, right? And we look at them and we're like, what is the matter with you? Aren't you good at this? And the problem is we're leaving them to figure it out. Hence my brilliant title, Left to Their Own Devices. I gotta tell you, when I figured that one out, I was like, oh, very satisfying. So in no other area do we do this, right? Having taught English, I'm never gonna hand a kid War and Peace and be like, good luck with that. Hope it goes well for you, right? Especially a younger kid, second grader, like, oh, I can stand on this, right? But they have no sense of what they're supposed to do with it. And yet in so many areas of technology, we assume they're fine. I think one of the problems is it comes from this concept of the digital native. And there's a huge difference between having tech all around you and knowing what to do with it. So I love this little kid who's like, hey, I figured all this stuff out, right? But what happens when someone finds his algorithm and jumps into his chat and starting to do things with it? He has no idea what to do, right? He might have the computer science skill, but he doesn't have the interpersonal skill. Hello, Jennifer Crane. There. Another sort of question that frames this for me is this idea that they're spending so much time on their own. So this is a statistic from 2022, shortly after the pandemic. But we were talking about kids being online 9 hours a day outside of school, looking at social media, consuming content, creating content, which is a huge portion of their day, and especially to do it totally on their own. And this idea that they're stuck kind of figuring it out really motivated me to figure out, all right, what kind of tools can I give them to address this? So one of the things that I have discovered, which made me so happy, is righteous indignation of kids is like a force of nature. And if you say to them, this stuff is being done to you, they're like, no way, man, not going to happen. And they are incredibly engaged in fighting back. So I try to find examples, and I'll share a couple now, of things that they experience regularly that might activate their sense of outrage. So one piece of it that I found really helpful is talking to them about gaming. And Fortnite, as you may know, when you win, it's called Victory Royale. And there was a trend where kids were sharing their smartwatch data right after they won. And if you notice, his heart rate is 174 beats per minute, sitting still. And I say to kids, if you think about what it would take you on a treadmill to get going like that, they're doing it manipulating color, sound, anticipation, right? How do you feel about that? And they're like, dude, that's not cool. Like, exactly, right? And they're doing it all over the place. There are people in a room somewhere whose job it is to move all the dials and figure out what's happening in your response. And they're making it more and more, not only addictive, but like stimulating to the point that physiologically you're responding this way. So that's one way that I've found that they're really interested in engaging. Another one is to talk to them about my personal experience. And I show them this photo, which is of my 3 kids in Canada. And I was standing right here and I didn't see it because I was looking at my phone. And my wife showed me this picture and I was like, where is that? She's like, Dumbo, that is where you were standing, not looking because you were looking at your phone. So we had what we call a conversation in my house about tech use. And I went off my phone for a month. And holy moly, was I a grumpy, unbelievably unpleasant individual. All the more realizing like, wow, if that's what's happening to me, I really need to figure this out. And what it has shifted for me is saying to kids, you know what? I was blaming you. I was like, what is the matter with you? Why are you not paying attention as I look at my cell phone? Right. And really figuring out with them, how are we both being manipulated? And even just that repositioning to say, you know what? We are in this experience together totally transforms the conversation with them. If you've heard about the anxious generation, AJ Giuliani has talked about how if we look at it more broadly, we are all being manipulated. And that piece, if you say to kids, I am just as much subjected to this, totally transforms the discussion as well. And they're much more willing to engage with you when you're saying, let's figure this out jointly, not like, let me tell you what to do. So backing up a little bit, what do we do as teachers to kind of have those conversations in the classroom? I think one big piece of it is looking at where can we put it in the curriculum. So this resource may be familiar to us already, but if it isn't, Common Sense Education has some really remarkable kind of resources that are across the board useful. But what we wanted to start with was this question of what kinds of things come up for you when I say tech in your classroom? Are they positive? Are they negative? And what we're looking at here is coming from Jim's classroom as well. So you're seeing both their response and then the response of people who are just in the Zoom. So I see distraction, anxiety, frustration, screen time, monitoring content, huge question, and one Jim will talk a little bit about. Better supporting students we have in the chat. Computers. So one thing I noticed is we're talking about hardware. A second one is some sort of negative experiences, but as is the case here, and I frequently find, the immediate association that I have with positivity, with creativity, with sort of engaging for the positive uses of tech has gotten sidelined by some of the problems. And so what I've really tried to bring to teachers is tools that give them ways to have the conversations and to kind of rethink where they might be having the discussions. So one of those, as I said, is Common Sense. And if you haven't looked at the resources, it is set up to have 6 areas of focus: media balance and well-being, news and media literacy, mental health. And as they look at those 6 categories, they also divide it by grade. And they are plug and play, meaning you can literally open them, go in and teach them with no preparation, or, and they encourage you to do this, customize them in any ways you want. So in a history classroom, you might talk about the ways in which news has manipulated people's understanding of the world. In a science classroom, you might talk about statistics and the ways in which data is being transferred and how that conversation is really changing our understanding of the way that we engage with democracy. Looking in English class, there's so many texts you can bring in that talk about these. And one of my favorite examples is a world language teacher I worked with in Cape, who instead of talking about like the menu or the weather, would talk about social media in her classes in Spanish. And the kids were so engaged in the conversation and so like fascinated by the subject matter that they wanted their Spanish to match their level of engagement with it. And it was amazing. I thought like, what a genius move. And it's such a small shift. All she did was shift the focus of the conversation and totally transform, and then allow her to talk about how are you using tech? Why are you on your phone right now? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing at this moment? So Common Sense offers a lot of those. And as I'll show you in this is in this one example, they structure it with learning objectives, which are laid out differently for every single lesson by grade level and by subject matter. They also offer you an essential question, which is also different for each lesson. And even by itself can be asked without the lesson, what is it that digital media is doing to hook us, and what can we do about it? That framing question with nothing else can really lead to cool conversations. Another place that this has been really useful, I think, is in whatever is your equivalent of homeroom or advisory, where people are always like, what am I supposed to talk about? Popping up a question like this really amazes me how much kids will be willing to engage. They also give you definitions. In this case, one I'll reference in a second, humane design. So these are the things where technology is there to help you versus addictive design features, which are there to keep you using it mindlessly. And that conversation with kids is hilarious. Watching their faces that they're like, whoa, what is happening? So we've linked here digital balance and well-being 6, 7, and 8, but up in the left-hand corner, if you get to that screen, you can choose your grade levels and any of the 6 topics as possibilities. One really powerful thing to talk to kids about, and where you can embed it all over the place in the curriculum, is something called behavioral architecture. And that's just things you do now to make you make better choices in the future. So this is something as simple as the post-it on your fridge that says, hey, do you want to have that soda, or would you be better off drinking water? That's behavioral architecture. But you can build it into tech and build it into your analog world with tech in really cool ways. About 5 years ago now, having had this conversation with some students in a school I'd never been to, they didn't know me. About a month later, a young woman walked up to me in a restaurant, and I was like, I do not know who this is. She was like, Mr. Warner, I remembered you talked about behavioral architecture. I was like, wow, okay. She goes, let me show you what I did. And she turned around, she was wearing her backpack, and she and her friends now zip their phone into the pocket of the backpack so that all they have to do is remember it requires taking off the backpack and unzipping it. And that little bit of friction is enough to get them to think about it and potentially make a different choice. And she shared this with me, and I was like, okay, I can go now. I'm done. That's so cool that you're doing that. Totally her idea, and such a great, simple example. So I've raised with kids too questions like, where do you charge your phone? Were you aware that there are plugs in your kitchen? And they're like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Have you ever met an alarm clock? Those concepts, like you can be sort of, playful with them and really surprise them in what they've routinized and get them to think about what might you do differently. Giving them what Common Sense Media calls the family media plan is another amazing tool, because of course kids are getting these messages at home as much, if not more, than at school. I ran the Makerspace in Cape, and this young woman brought me a little kind of prison that she made out of popsicle sticks and 3D printed. I was like, what is this? And she goes, it's a jail for my dad's cell phone. And I thought, wow, that's hilarious and so sad, right? And as I said, like looking up from your own phone to be like, why are you so distracted? Why aren't you coming to dinner? Is so common that getting families to make those consistent rules can really transform a kid's experience at home. Looking at my own phone, as I said, giving them your personal experience to the degree that that feels comfortable, I will show them that my own phone has nothing on it that you would anticipate. So I don't have internet, I don't have games, I don't have any social media or email. And people are like, how do you do your job? And I'm like, I go to a computer. And it's pretty amazing. And my phone is in black and white, which people find astounding, but the colors are set up to make me look at it and be engaged with it. And so I'm basically fighting back and saying that behavioral architecture, changing the colors, is enough to make me look at it less, which is just that little bit of friction to cause me to shift my thinking. Another one that's suggested frequently is rearrange your apps so your thumb doesn't just go to the same place all the time. That's another just little tiny thing that you do that makes you behave differently. Talking to them about the features, as I said, humane versus addictive. When I've said to kids, do you notice that that app has no clock in the corner? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, so someone coded it so there's no clock in the corner. And they're like, oh yeah, right? because they don't want you to pay attention to time. It is a digital casino where they don't have access to light, they don't have clocks on the wall, and that is half of the reason you sit there pulling the arm of the slot machine for hours and hours. And I say, that's exactly what they're designing for you. This group of people in the room somewhere are creating an environment where this is your response. My son calls these the breakup dots, where you watch them to see whether or not your boyfriend is breaking up with you or not. And I say to him, listen, is that what it is? Or is it to keep you looking at your phone until the next notification comes in? Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Someone is making money in the attention economy on these dots, and that's why they exist. It is not there for your convenience. This idea too of having them observe the physical response. How is your body reacting, whether it's to games, or I'll have them turn their phones upside down and put them on their leg and tell them not to touch them. Hilarious and so heartbreaking because they're like, yeah. That sensibility of how powerful the impulse is can really just get them thinking like, I don't like that. I don't like that something has that kind of power over me. So as I said at the outset, Jim's focus here is now on these bigger pictures, but I feel like what I've been amazed by is the kids' willingness to have these conversations as well, and to kind of peel back the onion and say to them, what is it that's happening to you that is this powerful? Why is it happening? And how on top of all of this and what the industry is doing are what Jim calls the bad actors out there really messing with them and making them subjected to more than just the attention issues, but to actual danger.
Thanks, Jonathan. So a couple of things on affirming on your side. It always gets me. The first time session this morning, it didn't, but you just got me again because, all right, so I've been married for like 3,000 years, and we sit on the couch and we scroll left or right or up or down while we're watching TV, and then once in a while I get angry with my phone, or I'm watching TV but my wife is scrolling, and I'm like, what are you doing on your phone? And then I'm like, well, who are you judging her? You're on your phone all the time. And so you had mentioned, not in this presentation, but Facebook Marketplace. When I was superintendent of schools in Greenville, a friend of mine used to call me the Kakajo picker. And because I love it when somebody leaves junk on the side of the road and I see it and I say, I could make something out of that. I could use that. However, Facebook Marketplace, when I search for, I'm looking for a ceiling fan right now for a project I have. When I search for a ceiling fan, why do I get so much material? I'm searching, oh, there's one, but then it's like, oh, no, I'm not. And then it's like, I gotta go. Oh, why is that in there? Is that Temu? Why? And so the algorithm and the addictive nature of when it gets you, we say that if you pulled a slot machine and you won every time, you wouldn't gamble with the slot machine. It's that thing in the brain that's going on that keeps you coming back until maybe you find the score. And what irritates me to no end about that is that somebody out there smarter than I am, a room full of mathematicians on whatever platform, have decided that this is how it ought to work. And they're also being paid by various vendors to get product there. So, don't get me wrong, I love capitalism, but it sometimes irritates me that I might be the target of somebody else's mathematical equation. And my wife said last night, hey, you want to get rid of our phones? And I'm like, you mean permanently? And part of me said, that's a great idea. Let's go to dumb phones and let's not. But then the other side of me said I had to replace my pull cord of my generator. I went to YouTube and there was a step-by-step. So this double-edged sword of technology is significant.
That term, intermittent variable rewards. It's a great one to Google with kids. It's why you keep going back to the slot machine. If the analogy is if the mouse got cheese every time, he would be bored of cheese. But if you only give him cheese once every 3, 4, 5 times, it gets more and more exciting for him, hoping that pushing the bar is going to get it to fall down. And to say to kids too, it's not like Facebook can't afford the coders to make it work better. So clearly someone has decided the search is going to be crappy so that the result is, I'm on there a lot longer. Those conversations with kids are as I said, hilarious, but also like crazy frustrating as you realize just how much they're manipulating that room full of mathematicians and knew they were the evil forces. Ah,
So even while we work with this in our jobs day in and day out, there's a part of it that says, well, they've got me in the door a little bit, and I'm half an addict, and I've made those decisions like, who's the boss, me or the machine? And so I think there's a lot in that. Um, so what I do, I used to be I was the cool principal who was like the techie principal for many years, and I went to one school, Orono, and I remember saying the only way I'll be the principal here is if you go one-to-one with technology. The changes over time. I wrote my first school curriculum on an Apple IIe that wasn't on the network, but the change pace of being connected in a connected world and what that presents for staff and students continues to grow astronomically. And then we're going to sprinkle AI in there. And what does that mean? Now, that double-edged sword part, it's tremendous. It's amazing. And then there's also, it grows on the other side of potential issue as well. So I'd like to talk about a couple of things today with cybersecurity, access, and student data privacy. That graphic A4L, the state pays for all school systems to be a member of the Student Data Privacy Consortium. And that's a national group that works for any app that you're using in your school. Your IT director should, if they haven't, or somebody who handles data, have that vetted. And there's probably a binding legal document within access for, I got it, within A4L, so that that vendor does not sell the data, use the data, follows the laws. Sometimes the laws in one state vary to another state. So it provides you that opportunity. For example, the PowerSchool breach that everybody probably knows about, 50 million students' information, I guess I'm told. There's some binding language in that protected that, and basically was supposed to hold PowerSchool to a particular script should there be a breach. And then the other graphic there is the state cybersecurity plan. So K-12 is considered a critical infrastructure partner. And what that means essentially is the water district, executive branch, we are crucial. There was a couple of years ago a swatting episode where somebody, phone call within the school that there was a dangerous person in the building. That's just horrible. Almost all of those have come from a different country. And so looking at the technology, how do we stop that from happening? But we're a critical partner because if you want to turn the state upside down for a day, do that to about 6 or 7 schools all at once and watch what happens. With parents crying and holding their children in front of the school. It's just, it's horrible. Go ahead. So to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world, we're connected and we have firewalls and so on and so forth. But as we speak, there are programs trying to access our information, student information, and schools used to be a little bit protected, and now we seem to be a top target because we're not protected. I spoke with an IT director recently in Vermont who had a ransomware. Every place that I've been as a school administrator, I've dealt with something with technology that is very difficult. And it's at our level. So it's good to know like what the supports are that are out there, what you can do. If there's nothing you can do, what should be going on at different levels. Yep. So there are a variety of different ways to try to gain access. I've been fooled before. I'll speak in a few minutes. I've an announcement here. Hang on. Yeah, I don't know what that was. Phishing attempts, smishing attempts, deep fakes. AI is now famous for doing a deep fake, for trying to prey on the elderly. Please send me money, grandma. And it is their voice. It's been deep faked. We know about cyber bullying. We had a situation in Southern Maine where students flooded a particular test server during final exams. A paid service, you can go online and pay $20 or something and get a server hit 2 million times at a particular point of the day and basically bring it to a screeching halt. Unfortunately, it also brought the town to a halt that day, including its emergency medical services. So there are some things going on out there. Ransomware and malware, when people get on and get the data, like the PowerSchool breach and extortion, really demand some money for them not to display what you've done, either that's might be embarrassing or your psych eval that's in your student information system that is now going to be put online. So it is significant. I was almost victim. I don't know. Maybe you get these in your text message to Easy Pass, like your bills needs to be paid. The text messages, the smishing they call it, is on the climb. I get these random ones that say, "Hey, I'm planning on attending the wedding. Are you going to be there?" Like, seriously? Oh, you're just paying your Easy Pass?
It's like the 14th number. I'm like, I'm not gonna pay it.
It's maddening, and it's like, what can we do to make it stop? So anyways, I almost fell for the Easy Pass because I was in Massachusetts the weekend prior, and I have that thing up there, my little detector, and I'm like, oh, probably there's something wrong with that. I'm like, oh, it doesn't feel right. And that red flag doesn't feel right moment is where we're trying to bring people to. It's interesting. My grandfather was fooled into letting someone get on his computer to fix it. Oh yeah, we can fix that. Next thing you know, they're inside his thing, looking for his bank account and so on and so forth. It's just nightmare stuff. So in the world, this is going on as we speak. There's a room of you pick the country that doesn't seem to favor the United States, and there's an army of people right now trying to take us down. America is a big target. K-12-6 is a group that we work with. They provide a map of some of these things, and we go in and say, okay, what did they do now? What happened here? And what was the mistake, perhaps, or what security or firewall or protections were not in place, or what do we need to develop that might help us out? Go ahead. I mentioned that I've been breached a couple of times, actually. MOVEit is main certification, so that the state was breached, and it used this software called MOVEit to take 100,000 records and get it from point A to point B, to move digital information from one place to another. And that particular app had been hacked. So I think I reported it or went in to find out if I was breached to the Department of Certification at the DOE. Yes, I was. I don't know. I get 2 years of credit service, and they let me know if my name is on the dark web, or they're trying to steal my social security number or what have you. So we say sometimes it seems like it's not a matter of if, but when somebody has your information somewhere, somehow. So again, that double-edged sword of the beauty of the power of being on the network, and then some of its challenges. I mentioned swatting and some things going on in schools this year. We've had the PowerSchool breach. We had a nation-state actor in South Portland schools this year. A Cumberland student email was hacked this year. And it just, it seems to be nonstop. So our IT directors are, let's just say maybe they need some blood pressure medication these days. So CISA is a federal agency, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency, and they provided a report to K-12 a few years ago that said, if K-12 schools will do A, B, these 3 or 4 or 5 things, they will become like 60–70% of their cyber posture, you call it, will be safer. So we pushed that report statewide, and go ahead. Some of those things that it said you should do right away was implement multi-factor. And we're in the process through a Homeland Security grant of sending out, I think it's 8,000, 9,000 YubiKeys, the little key you put in there that allows you to do multi-factor, one of the safest products out there. When you do your banking, that sort of thing, when you have to get a message on your phone and be able to multi-factor in, And schools, for many, many years just never did that. It was a single sign-on. So hopefully you're doing that everywhere. It's sometimes challenging. Prioritizing updates when your TV, your phone says we want to update or to the next operating system. Quite often those are patches that are for known vulnerabilities, bugs and fixes. And it's easy to say, I'll do that later. Yeah, whatever, and move on. But you really should. And then just being wise and trained in awareness, so that when something comes in your inbox as a teacher, that doesn't seem right, and how do I report that? So it's become a need in schools to have more training in that area, which I think would be more interesting than bloodborne pathogens. Just saying.
What? No.
I know, hard to
Jim,
believe.
Another part that we talked about on a different session was that doing these updates with kids in the moment, like when was the last time they restarted their computer? When was the last time they accepted updates? Gets the conversation going. Spending those 5 minutes, or in the case of Maine State Computers, hour and 20 minutes to do the update really is transformative in your security measure, but also gets the kids talking during that 5-minute break. Why are we doing this? What's happening? What is it that's going on? And giving them the example of the patch management, things that are put in place. And then we do have people whose jobs it is to fight back, has led to great conversations about real world uses of computer science and how those mathematicians in the room somewhere have mortal enemies on the good side, who are creating this to help shut them down. And is like such a minor thing, but it really does elevate the conversation and get them engaged in a way that, as I said, I didn't expect, but has worked really well.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, so we've been teaming with the state in a Homeland Security grant to up our game at the state level, school level. Go ahead. You can check out that link if you want to. I mentioned the keys and multi-factor going out to schools. KnowBe4 is a product that is also part of a particular grant that we're doing. So you can do the security training, so teachers can be more aware of when they're being spoofed or phished or what have you. This one's I've had a blast with this one. When I was a principal, which I did for 17 years, the state thou says in legislation or that you will have 10 fire drills a year. And me, just being who I am, we had like 7 left and it was, May 30th, so, well, haven't been doing a good job sprinkling these in here. So I would apologize to my teachers and say, hey, I'm sorry, but Thursday we're having 5 fire drills, because I want to be able to say honestly on that click box to the state of Maine that I did this. So the likelihood of a fire in the school it's a crazy low odds. The likelihood of a cyber attack and all of your teacher information getting into bad hands is quite high, or higher. So we decided to do K-12 Cyberstorm, which is a fire drill for K-12. So on March 27th, this was last year's participants. This March, we have another exercise that will have business managers there, IT directors, superintendents, IT teams. One of the challenges in Maine schools, it might be here, not to pick on Stratton, but I just called them the other day. And I noticed that the person I needed to speak with, when I looked at their about information or their staff directory on their school website, they had like 6 responsibilities, right? So when I was superintendent in Greenville, I was superintendent, special ed director. I had a 3rd wave lunch recess duty. This is Maine schools, especially rural Maine. So to say that all places in Maine can have this like cybersecurity IT expertise is pretty challenging at the pace of change, and that they can quadruple their income if they have that skill set, probably within the business industry, can be challenging. So some of the things we're trying to do is train them, but also provide them with mentor relationships and services that will maybe do that remotely, so that when there's an issue, it's more easily detected and it doesn't quite put as much pressure on them. a little bit on the infrastructure and digital divide. You can keep going. So all of Maine schools are connected through the Maine School Library Network, and this school that I'm in and the school in Southern Maine would have the same internet speed. So E-rate and Network Maine's connection allows some equity there. One of the challenges, and you'll see it in one of the federal plans here, the top one, which I'm not sure with the Fed shakeup things going on, if you can still get that, but we have it. But nonetheless, there's the access, design, and youth divides. So if a student leaves this particular high school and they want to do some homework or some research, they don't have internet at home or their connection's slow, and then the kid next to you has an iPhone 30, I think they're only up to 16, with full data plan. Anywhere they are, they can do this or do that. That's not really, in my opinion, a level playing field. So the broadband plan through the Connectivity Authority of Maine, I know this was done when I was in Greenville during the pandemic, it was huge, is bringing fiber to the home or high-speed broadband to the home, be it Starlink or what have you, helps to level that playing field and that access issue. And in my opinion, helps the Maine economy, because a lot of people that had property in Moosehead Lake area, they came there during COVID because there was no COVID in Maine once, right? We'll just go up to our lake house and we'll escape it all. And then they found out maybe Maine's the place to stay. And through high-speed internet, some people employed can do that. So that's pretty cool. And there's a plan in the Broadband Action Plan to help provide that equity for Maine and for tribal partners. Go ahead. There's a broadband map. It's probably clickable in the presentation if you're interested. But look across the country, the green areas you'll see that have the slower speeds and poor access. And I live on a dirt road, a mile driveway that I have to use Starlink. It's the only way I can connect. But that's changing because we are one of those BEAD schools. So, you know, to raise the game in your community, if access is a need, see what's going on in that domain so that you can jump in on that.
And it's also a cool one for kids to get involved in, about mapping, like where their connectivity is. You talked earlier about how kids will go home to no internet access and someone else has great internet access. In a social studies class, talking about, okay, the economics of that means that the business doesn't benefit, but does democracy benefit? Does participation? Does education? And they just, again, this like righteous indignation, we're like, that is not cool, is so powerful in getting the conversations going.
Right. And that switch to like streaming services, I don't know if your TVs are streaming and so forth. We did a virtual student conference and I had schools all over the state and we all did a speed test at the same time. They had to plug those into a spreadsheet. I took notice of a particular location. I'm like, wow, that is so slow. And it gave me some opportunity to follow up to say, you know, what's going on there. Because in this information age, access to it is it's fairly important. Okay. We provided some grants statewide to up firewalls and so forth. I mentioned the CISA report, schools that couldn't afford to patch or update a wire closet to make things run faster or make your connections more secure. We're always looking for resources to do that. And we distributed it to 61 districts. Managed detection and response, that's early detection. So the University of Maine has a product, so they do the first filtration. So there's a reason that inappropriate sites don't show up and it's all filtered at the university. However, they try to get through at the local level as well and bypass that. Very, very creative. This is a funny story, but or maybe it isn't. But at the DOE, we use YouTube sometime in our presentations. And you know the commercials that come on YouTube. Well, I just don't like when I'm presenting to middle schoolers and the Jack Daniels commercial comes up. I just don't like it. So you can, buy the subscription to stop that. But all of those things in your Google Classroom that have to be managed like that, that's how you get past that, are ever, the change pace is substantial. So having that expertise locally is pretty crazy. So citizenship, sort of Quarks to Quasars here meets your infrastructure, your cybersecurity. There's a lot out there that protects you, but it behooves the staff to maybe have a data team to communicate. What happens with staff data? Like, where is that kept? To just be in the know. I worked with an association during the pandemic because all of that payroll stuff was on the business keeper's dining room table. Well, how could it not be? She wasn't coming into work, and this was the pandemic rule, but all of that stuff is there. So it's like, wow, so who gets to see that and why? And so your information, that is probably mostly all digital in your school system for staff and for students. It's crucial, and it should be talked about regularly.
The quasar that we had there, I remember, Jim, is like where these two things collide, there's an explosion. We were trying to remember why did we put the exploding spaceship in there? Where they collide is with this question of digital citizenship shifting into digital leadership. And how do we say to kids, what can they do about this? How do they get engaged in the conversations that will begin to make changes for them? And I think one of those questions to raise with them is all the different things that are at work. Jim was talking about how in many districts, the people most in charge have really low levels of comfort with dealing with the collision of all these different regulations and laws and policies. So getting kids talking about what are their rights to their data privacy? How does that work with what their parents' rights are? How does that work with the ways in which they are trying to be marketed to? What does it mean to turn 13? Those kids are subjected to all of these, and the people most frequently trying to monitor them are not necessarily the most comfortable at doing that. So getting them to the table has been really, really impressive. Getting them being a part of whether it's curriculum planning, professional development planning, getting them in front of your board, to your school board to talk about this as well, really does give them a sense of agency that's very different than how they feel now, where so much of it just feels like it's happening to them. Finding things that they're really passionate about as a piece of this as well. So making them involved in the things that they care about really can give them a different perspective as well. And for example, their parents are being activated by this book, The Anxious Generation. Or did they agree? Are they differently experiencing growing up than we did because of their technology use? Or wait until 8th, this movement to hold cell phones away from kids or not provide them until 9th grade. What do they think about it? Does that make sense? Do they understand why? How do they feel about it? Getting parents involved in those conversations too, that wraparound approach really does help. Common Sense Education offers, as I said, a lot of ways to start these conversations, but it also offers pathways to district, school, and teacher recognition as sort of advocates for digital leadership. They also provide really great professional development asynchronously online, if you'd like to partake of that. And ways in which you can engage families very similar to the curriculum that are just laid out for you to have family engagement nights. So we put at the end here these kind of postcards because we feel like the most important thing you do leaving today is somehow continuing the conversation. And for that reason, we kind of summarize 5, 6 of the things that we talked about as a conversation starter. And we'd encourage you to take a picture of them, take a screenshot of them, and just text them to someone or email them to someone and say, hey, this is something I feel like we should talk more about, whether it's a teaching partner, your spouse, whatever. These questions that can really launch additional conversation are where the transformation might take place. So that first one is, how might we support students' efforts to move towards digital leadership and not just digital sort of compliance? How might we provide students with resources to become mindful tech consumers, much more aware of their body responses, of how much they're using tech and why they're using it, when they're using it? Helping students learning ways to protect their privacy online. What can they do about it? There's a hilarious password game where they have to come up with a secure password that we've had students engage with for 20, 30 minutes, competing with one another to come up with the most secure password. That is just like so simple and so fantastic in getting them thinking about why and how cyber criminals are getting to their data. Engaging students in discussions about how big tech is targeting them or manipulating them, why they feel like that's happening and how they feel about the fact that it is happening. How might we make student participation and feedback key parts of our efforts and making sure we're staying relevant to what they're worried about and what's concerning them? Helping our students create behavioral architecture to support learning, just little ways in which we can say, hey, what might you do differently so that you're engaging with tech differently? Engaging families in our community in supporting digital leadership, getting parents to the table, using the family media plan to say, what would it look like if we all followed the same rules? Utilizing the expertise and resources we might not have internally. All right, that's Jim and I. We'd be delighted to help you out with that if we can. We've come to department meetings, worked to support things asynchronously or remotely. We're happy to do that as well. Coming to faculty meetings as well. And then maybe the simple question, what's the first thing to do? What might we do today as a single step in any of these directions? That really just launches the conversation. So remembering sort of at the base of this, technology does provide all of these advantages. Of course, that's what Jim and I do in our bread and butter, but it's balanced, as he said, with some of those challenges. And the Teacher's Essential Guide to Classroom Tech from Common Sense Education really gives you a nice kind of framework for these positive uses and the ways in which those can be balanced with some of the conversations about the concerns. We'd love to hear from you. Our contact information is there. If you'd like to provide feedback on this session, we would welcome that as well. That's LTT feedback. And then I'll just show you, but you can get to it yourself. That's the contact hour slide if you want to get a contact hour for today's session. And we really appreciate your coming. You're coming online. Jim, great to see you. And I hope you have a good few hours until I see you this afternoon.
Everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for your work.
Thanks, Jim. And thank you guys. That's an impressive. We have 15 people in the Zoom. That's awesome.
Oh,
Trying to get better at it. I'm the one, as you might imagine, who could go on for like 6 hours, and so working really hard on being better. Yeah. Yeah, okay, coach, whatever. All right, how do I get out of this one when I'm in here? There we go. And stop this.